They say a hidden sin does not sleep. It waits patiently for the night it will be heard. On a windless evening, something knocked at Akosua's door, not once but 3 times. The air turned cold, the dogs whimpered, and water began to seep beneath the threshold. Inside, Kojo trembled, for he knew the river had come to collect its debt. Stay with us and uncover the secret that nearly destroyed them. In every village, there is a home people admire and a truth they do not see. Akosua's compound stood at the edge of the village, where the red earth met the tall grasses that whispered with the wind. Her home was always clean, her courtyard swept before sunrise, and her cooking fire never went cold. The women in the market often spoke her name with respect. Akosua has good hands, they would say, and a good heart. But even a good heart can live beside a restless shadow. Her husband, Kojo, was known as a man of success. He traded in cloth, salt, and sometimes gold. His goods traveled far, and his name carried weight in nearby towns. When he walked through the market, men greeted him with nods and women lowered their voices. Yet Kojo was not a man who laughed easily. There was a distance in him, like someone who stood at the edge of a river, but feared the water. He rarely joined the elders at the shrine, and when festivals were held near the sacred river, he always found a reason to be elsewhere. At first, Akosua thought little of it. Every man has his own ways, she told herself. But as the seasons passed, small things began to trouble her. Kojo would wake in the middle of the night, his breathing sharp, his body tense. Sometimes she would find him sitting outside, staring into the darkness, as if listening to something only he could hear. "Kojo," she once whispered, stepping beside him, "what troubles your spirit?" He did not look at her. "It is nothing," he replied quickly. "Just dreams." But Akosua knew the difference between dreams and fear. Dreams fade with the morning. Fear stays. She began to notice how he avoided the path that led to the river. Even when it was the shortest way to the market, Kojo would take the longer road through the dry fields. One afternoon, as she pounded cassava with the other women, she overheard a quiet conversation. "Have you seen Kojo near the shrine?" one woman asked. Another shook her head. "A man who avoids the river avoids something deeper." They fell silent when they noticed Akosua listening. That night, as the firelight danced against the walls of their hut, Akosua watched her husband carefully. He ate in silence, his eyes distant, his hands moving, as though guided by habit rather than hunger. "Kojo," she said gently, "why do you no longer greet the elders at the shrine?" His hand froze mid-air. For a brief moment, something passed across his face, something sharp and hidden. "I have no business there," he replied, his voice low. Akosua held his gaze. "The shrine belongs to all of us." Kojo's eyes hardened. "Some places," he said slowly, "are better left alone." The words lingered in the air like smoke. Akosua felt a chill she could not explain. That night, long after Kojo had fallen into a restless sleep, she lay awake listening. Outside, the wind moved through the tall grasses, and far in the distance, she thought she heard water. They say greed does not knock loudly, it whispers, and only the foolish lean in to listen. Many years before Akosua ever knew his name, Kojo was not a man of wealth or silence. He was a young man with bright eyes, quick laughter, and a hunger that reached beyond the horizon. Back then, he walked side by side with his closest friend Yo, a man of steady spirit and cautious heart. Where Kojo saw opportunity, Yo saw consequence. Where Kojo chased, Yo questioned. One dry season, when the river had pulled back its waters and revealed stones long hidden beneath its surface, the 2 young men wandered farther than they should have. They were not meant to go near the sacred bend. Everyone in the village knew it. That part of the river belonged to something older than memory, something the elders spoke of in lowered voices. The shrine stood there quiet and watchful, guarded by carved figures darkened by time and offerings long forgotten. "Let us turn back," Yor said, his voice uneasy as they approached the edge of the forbidden ground, but Kojo did not stop. "Do you fear shadows?" he laughed lightly. The world belongs to those who dare. Yor frowned. Not everything is meant to be taken. Kojo waved him off and stepped closer to the water's edge. That was when he saw it. Half buried between smooth stones, glinting beneath the fading sunlight, lay a bracelet unlike anything he had ever seen. It shimmered not like gold, but like moving water caught in metal form. Kojo's breath caught. "Do you see that?" he whispered. Yor's eyes widened, and he stepped back immediately. "Do not touch it." But Kojo was already moving. "It could change everything," he said, his voice filled with something dangerous. "With this, I could trade beyond this village. I could become more." Yor grabbed his arm. "Kojo, listen to me. That is not ours. The priest warned us what belongs to the river must remain with the river." Kojo pulled away. "The priest speaks to keep men afraid," he replied. "I will not live my life with empty hands." Yor's voice rose, fear tightening his words. "And I will not live mine cursed." For a moment, they stood facing each other, the line between them no longer just friendship but choice. Then Kojo turned his back on Yor and reached for the bracelet. The moment his fingers closed around it, the river stilled. Not a ripple, not a sound. The air grew heavy, pressing against his chest. Yor stumbled backward. "Kojo, put it back." But Kojo only smiled, though his heart had begun to pound in a way he could not explain. "It is mine now," he said. That night the village slept beneath a sky without wind. But near the sacred bend, the water moved on its own, softly, unnaturally. And in Kojo's hut, where he hid the bracelet, beneath layers of cloth, a faint whisper filled the darkness, too low to understand yet too clear to ignore. Kojo turned in his sleep, his brow damp with sweat. The whisper did not stop. In the days that followed, fortune came to him, as if guided by unseen hands. His trades prospered. Opportunities appeared where none had existed before. Doors opened. Wealth followed. The village praised him. They called him blessed. But Yor stopped walking beside him, because some blessings do not come from light, and some gains carry a silence that listens and waits. They say when a debt is ignored, it does not disappear. It grows teeth. The first sign came quietly, like a shadow slipping across the ground unnoticed. Akosua woke before dawn, as she always did, to prepare the morning fire. But when her feet touched the floor, she froze. The earth beneath her mat was damp. At first, she thought little of it. Perhaps the rain had found its way through the cracks in the roof. But when she stepped outside, the sky was clear and the ground beyond their compound was dry. No rain had fallen. Still, she said nothing. But the next day, the cassava leaves in their garden began to curl and blacken at the edges, as though something invisible had touched them. By the third day, 2 of their goats were found lifeless near the fence, their bodies untouched, their eyes wide with something like fear. Whispers began to stir among the villagers. "This is not ordinary," one man murmured at the market. "Something is wrong in that house," another replied. Akosua tried to silence the growing unease in her heart. Misfortune comes to every home, she told herself. But deep within her, something refused to settle. And Kojo had begun to unravel. He no longer sat calmly at meals. His hands trembled as he ate, his eyes darting toward the doorway, as if expecting something or someone to enter without warning. At night, he no longer slept. Instead, he paced, back and forth, like a man being hunted by something only he could see. Kojo Akosua said one evening, her voice steady, though her heart raced, "This is no longer something we can ignore. The house is changing. The land is changing. You are changing." Kojo stopped pacing. For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly he turned to face her. "It will pass," he said, but his voice lacked strength. Akosua stepped closer. "Then why do you look as though you are waiting for something worse?" Kojo's eyes flickered. But before he could answer, a sound broke through the night. A soft drip, then another and another. Akosua turned toward the corner of the room, water. It was seeping through the walls, not pouring, not flowing, seeping, as if the house itself was sweating. Akosua's breath caught. Kojo, do you see this? Kojo did not move. His face had gone pale. I told you, he whispered, more to himself than to her it would come. Before Akosua could speak again, a heavy knock struck the door. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed through the room like a drumbeat of judgment. Neither of them moved. The air grew thick, heavy with something unseen. Then from outside, a voice, low, distant, yet unmistakably clear. Kojo. Akosua's heart pounded. She turned to him, her voice trembling. Who is that? Kojo shook his head, stepping back as though the sound itself could reach out and grab him. No, he muttered. No, it is too soon. The knocking stopped, the voice faded, but the water did not. It continued to seep, spreading slowly across the floor. The next morning, word spread quickly through the village. By midday, Nana Kwaku, the oldest elder and keeper of traditions, stood at the entrance of their compound. He did not step inside. Instead, he closed his eyes, listening not with his ears, but with something deeper. Then he opened them and looked directly at Kojo. A man who carries what is not his. Nana Kwaku said slowly, does not walk alone. Silence fell. Akosua turned to her husband, her heart now filled with a truth she could no longer ignore. Kojo, she whispered, what have you done? But Kojo could not answer, because for the first time, the past had found its voice. They say the truth does not arrive gently. It breaks the door and demands to be seen. The nights grew heavier after the voice fast called Kojo's name. Sleep abandoned their home like a frightened guest. Each evening, as darkness stretched across the village, Akosua felt it, the same cold weight settling into her chest. The air inside the compound no longer felt like air, it felt watched. And the water, it never returned to the river. Instead, it returned to them. At first, it crept along the edges of the walls. Then it gathered in shallow pools beneath their sleeping mats. By the 4th night, it rose enough to touch Akosua's ankles as she stood trembling in the dim glow of the fire. This is no longer misfortune, she said, her voice firm, despite the fear that clawed at her throat. This is something you brought into this house. Kojo sat in silence, his eyes hollow, his hands clasped so tightly, his knuckles turned pale. Speak to me, Akosua demanded. I am your wife, not a stranger outside your door. Kojo shook his head. You would not understand. Then make me understand, she cried. The fire flickered violently, as though stirred by an unseen breath. From somewhere beyond the walls, the sound of water echoed again, soft, rhythmic, patient, calling, Kojo. He flinched, pressing his hands over his ears. Stop it, he whispered. Stop calling me. Akosua stepped closer, her voice breaking now. Who is calling you? Before he could answer, another voice cut through the night. Because he will not tell you, I will. Both of them turned sharply toward the doorway. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the faint moonlight. Yo. Older now, wiser. But his eyes still carried the same truth Kojo had once turned away from. Akosua rushed forward. Yo, what is happening to us? Yor did not look at her. He looked only at Kojo. I warned you, he said quietly. I told you that day by the river, some things are not meant for human hands. Kojo's voice cracked. You should not be here. No, Yor replied, stepping inside his feet untouched by the creeping water. But neither should that which you brought into this world. Akosua's breath trembled. What is he talking about? Yor finally turned to her, his gaze steady but heavy with sorrow. Your husband stole from the sacred river, he said. The words fell like thunder. Akosua staggered back slightly, her eyes searching Kojo's face for denial. But there was none. He took what belonged to the spirit, Yao continued. A bracelet. One that binds itself to the one who dares to claim it. Akosua's voice shook. Kojo, tell me this is not true. Kojo lowered his head. Silence answered her. Tears welled in her eyes, but they did not fall. You built our life on a lie, she whispered. Everything we have, everything we are. Kojo's shoulders trembled. I did it for us, he said weakly. For a better life. A better life. Akosua's voice rose filled with pain. Or a cursed one. The water at their feet rippled suddenly, as though reacting to her words. Yul spoke again, his tone firm. The river does not forget. It gives, but it always takes back. Akosua turned away, her chest tight with betrayal. All the nights, all the silence, all the fear. Now it had a name. You let me sleep beside this curse, she said softly, her voice heavy with hurt. You let me believe we were blessed. Kojo reached out, but she stepped back. Do not touch me, she said. Outside, the wind rose suddenly, carrying with it the distant sound of rushing water. Louder now, closer. And once again, the voice returned. Kojo. This time it was no longer patient. This time it sounded like judgment. They say when truth is finally spoken, the path forward is never easy, but it is the only path that remains. That same night, while Kojo sat broken in silence and Yul watched with heavy eyes, Akosua made her decision. She would no longer wait for answers to come to her. She would go and seek them. Before the first light of dawn touched the sky, Akosua wrapped her cloth tightly around her shoulders and stepped out of the compound. The air was cold, thick, with a quiet that did not belong to morning. Behind her, Kojo stared. Akosua, he called weakly, but she did not turn, because some journeys must be walked alone. The path to the river shrine was one she had taken many times before, during festivals, during prayers, during moments of gratitude, but never like this. Today the path felt longer, heavier, as though the earth itself knew why she had come. The trees stood still. The birds did not sing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. When she reached the sacred bend, she stopped. The river flowed quietly, its surface smooth like polished glass. But beneath that stillness, Akosua felt something watching her, waiting. I have come for truth, she said, her voice steady, though her hands trembled. For a moment, nothing happened. Then from the shadows near the shrine, a figure emerged, an old woman, her back slightly bent, her eyes sharp and knowing. Her skin carried the stories of many seasons, and her presence held a quiet authority that could not be questioned. This was Mama Efua, the priestess of the river. You have come late, Mama Efua said, her voice calm, but heavy with meaning. Akosua bowed her head. I did not know. Mama Efua studied her carefully. The river knows. It always knows. Akosua swallowed. Tell me what has been done, and what must be undone. The old priestess stepped closer to the water, her gaze fixed on its surface. Years ago, she began. A man came here with hunger in his heart. Not hunger for food, but hunger for more than what was given to him. Akosua's chest tightened. He took what was not his. Mama Efua continued, and in doing so he bound himself to the river's wheel. The bracelet, Akosua whispered. Mama Efua nodded. That object is not wealth, she said. It is a covenant. It chooses and it watches. And when it is taken without honor, it waits. Akosua's voice trembled. The curse is not a curse, Mama Efua corrected gently. It is balance. The river gives, but it must also receive. Akosua closed her eyes briefly, the weight of the truth pressing down on her. Can it be returned? She asked. Yes, Mama Efua said, but not without cost. Akosua lifted her head. What cost? The priestess turned to face her fully. The man who took it must return it himself, she said. And he must surrender everything the river gave him in return. Akosua's heart sank. Everything, she whispered. Wealth, status, comfort. All of it, Mama Efua replied. And even then, the river will decide if mercy is deserved. Silence settled between them. Akosua thought of their home, their life, the years they had built together, built on something she had never known. Is there no other way, she asked softly. Mama Efwa shook her head. There is always a choice, she said, but there is never an escape. Akosua took a slow breath, then another. When she opened her eyes again, something within her had changed. Not fear, not anger, something stronger, resolve. I will bring him, she said. Mama Efua nodded. Then prepare your heart, because the river does not judge only the one who takes, it also sees the one who stays. Akosua turned back toward the path, toward home, toward Kojo, toward the truth that could no longer be hidden. And as she walked away, the river behind her rippled gently, as if it already knew what would come next. They say when the river calls your name a second time, it is no longer asking. The sky darkened before the sun had fully set. Clouds gathered like silent witnesses, heavy and unmoving. The air grew thick, pressing down on the village, as though the world itself was holding its breath. By nightfall, the storm had arrived. Not with rain at first, but with wind. A deep, restless wind that bent the trees and carried with it the distant roar of water. Inside the compound, Akosua stood at the doorway, her eyes fixed on Kojo. It is time, she said quietly. Kojo sat on the floor, the bracelet clutched tightly in his trembling hands. For the first time, he did not hide it. It shimmered faintly, pulsing like something alive. I cannot, he whispered. If I return it, everything will be gone. Akosua stepped closer. And if you do not, she said, her voice steady, there will be nothing left to lose. Kojo looked up at her, his eyes filled with fear and something else. Shame. I was afraid, he admitted, his voice breaking. Afraid of being nothing. Afraid of living a life that would be forgotten. Akosua knelt before him. And now, she asked softly. Kojo swallowed. Now I am afraid of what I have become. The wind howled louder, rattling the walls of the compound. Water seeped faster across the floor, rising, swirling, alive. Kojo, the voice echoed again, closer than ever. Akosua reached for his hand. We will face it, she said, not as who you pretended to be, but as who you are. For a long moment, Kojo said nothing. Then slowly, he nodded. Together, they stepped into the storm. The path to the river was no longer quiet. The wind tore through the grasses, and the trees groaned as though warning them to turn back. But they did not. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the earth itself resisted their movement. When they reached the sacred bend, the river was no longer still. It churned. The water rose and twisted, moving against itself, glowing faintly beneath the dark sky. Mama Efua stood by the shrine, unmoving, her presence steady against the chaos. You have come, she said. Kojo stepped forward, his body trembling. I have come to return what I took, he said, his voice barely steady. The river surged. From its depths, a form began to rise, not fully seen, not fully understood, but felt. A presence. Ancient, watching, judging. Kojo fell to his knees, the bracelet shaking in his hands. I was greedy, he said, his voice breaking under the weight of his own truth. I wanted more than what was given to me. I thought I could take and walk away. The wind stilled suddenly. Silence. Then slowly, Kojo lifted the bracelet and placed it at the edge of the water. The moment it touched the river, the current surged violently, pulling it beneath the surface. Gone. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the presence shifted, the water calmed, and a voice deep, neither cruel nor kind, filled the air. The debt is returned. Kojo closed his eyes tightly, but the balance remains. In that instant, something unseen moved through him. Not pain, but loss. A weight lifted, and another took its place. Kojo gasped, collapsing forward. Far away in the village, his wealth began to vanish. Trades failed, goods, spoiled, debt surfaced. The life he had built unraveled like cloth pulled from its weave. Everything the river had given was taken back. But his breath remained. His life remained. Akosua stepped beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. She did not speak. She did not turn away. The presence lingered for a moment longer. Then, as quietly as it had come, it faded. The river returned to stillness. The storm began to pass, and in the silence that followed, only one truth remained. Some deaths take everything and still choose to leave you alive to remember why. They say when the storm passes, it leaves behind more than silence. It leaves truth. In the days that followed, the village spoke in hushed voices. Kojo, once a man of wealth and admiration, was now a man stripped bare of everything he had built. His trade routes collapsed as quickly as they had once risen. His goods spoiled before reaching the market. Those who once greeted him with respect now watched from a distance, their eyes filled with quiet judgment. Was it not too sudden? Some whispered. No, others replied. Nothing that falls so quickly was ever truly his. Kojo heard every word, but this time, he did not defend himself. He did not hide. Each morning he rose before the sun, not to count profit, but to work the soil with his hands. The same hands that once reached for what was forbidden now dug into the earth, planting, tending, rebuilding. Slowly, honestly, painfully. And Akosua remained. But not as she once was. The woman who had once trusted without question, now watched with open eyes. Her love had not disappeared, but it had changed. It no longer stood on blind faith, it stood on truth. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in deep gold, Kojo sat beside her in the quiet of their compound. "I do not ask for forgiveness," he said softly. "I only ask for the chance to become a man worthy of it." Akosua looked at him, her gaze steady. "Forgiveness is not a word," she replied. "It is something you live every day." Kojo lowered his head. "I understand." And for the first time, he truly did. Seasons passed. The land once cursed began to breathe again. The crops returned not in abundance, but in fairness. The nights grew quiet, free from whispers and unseen voices. The river flowed as it always had, watchful, patient, balanced. Kojo changed, not in a single moment, but in many small ones. He spoke less, but with honesty. He worked harder, but without complaint. He gave more even when he had little. And though the village never forgot what had happened, they began to see something else. Not the man who had stolen, but the man who had faced what he had done. Because redemption is not found in words, it is proven in time. Akosua too found her strength, not in what she had endured, but in how she had stood firm when everything around her broke. She had not turned away from truth. She had walked into it even when it cost her peace. And that was her power. They say a hidden sin will always find its way to the light. But they also say a heart that accepts truth can still find its way back from darkness. Kojo learned that what is taken in silence will one day speak. And when it does, no wealth, no pride, no lie can stand against it. Only truth can. Only humility can. Only the courage to face what you have done can set you free. So remember this story when you are tempted by what is not yours. Because the river may be silent today, but it is always listening. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us, where are you watching from, and what lesson stayed with you the most?